After the attack at Redemption House, the girls head to the creamery instead of a hospital, where they agree that it was most likely a mask that Imogen saw and speculate that Bloody Rose was trying to target Imogen at her most vulnerable to try and trigger a psychotic break. The girls realize Tabby is next, the final girl, and they have no clue what Bloody Rose could do at this point. After Imogen has a dream about Dr. Sullivan being the one behind the Davy mask, the girls meet up at school early to discuss potential suspects. Farron suspects Mrs. Beasley because she blames the girls for what happened to Karen, and Imogen thinks she could be working with Kelly. Tabby suspects Mrs. Langsbury because she blames the girls for what happened to Chip, and given the mask, she could be working with Christian. And it's interesting that they're both mothers who lost a child, because I've seen on Reddit people bringing up Scream 2, which involved the mother of the killer from the first one. Tabby plans to talk to Christian, and Farron heads to Redemption House to talk to Kelly. Kelly is upset that Redemption House has been shut down because Pastor Malachi left and left a message with Mrs. Beasley that the town was rife with sin. So it has to be her, right? She would have been the one to pass along the message about Sandy, and now she's the one relaying the dead pastor's message. It has to be her or one of the twins. Farron warns Kelly about Bloody Rose wanting revenge on them, and when she says that it could be Kelly's mom, Kelly calls her deranged, but Farron questions where Sandy really is and tells Kelly that red roses are Bloody Rose's calling card, which actually gets through to Kelly because she knows that her mom grows red roses. Kelly calls Sandy's mom and finds out that she thinks Sandy is still in Millwood and texts her every night, so Kelly asks her own mom who called to say that Sandy was going to the Cape, and Mrs. Beasley says that it was Sandy's mom, but she also tries to claim that Pastor Malachi answered the call. So Kelly's suspicious, but her mom suggests that they go visit Karen's grave tomorrow and bring her some fresh roses. Tabby not so subtly questions Christian about making lifelike masks, but he deflects suspicion by saying that anybody with a 3D printer could make one. Yeah, they're so easy to make, anybody could have made them. Not me, I didn't make it, but anybody could have made them. That's how easy they are. Actually, my skills are too superior for lifelike masks. I make monsters, I don't make humans. Why? Why do you ask? Wes shows up at the theater, confirming that he's still alive, bummer, and announcing that he's quitting and moving to LA. So now Tabby and Christian are both promoted to co-managers. Noah breaks up with Sean and still doesn't tell him the truth about cheating on him, but he later figures it out and shows up to our apartment when only Jen is there, and he yells and punches a wall, and Noah comes home to find that he punched a hole in the wall, so she grabs a bat and heads over to his house to smash the windows on his car. Like, yeah, he shouldn't have punched a hole in your wall, obviously, but why would you then destroy his car? You cheated on him. So you cheat on him, he punches a hole in the wall, you leave it at that. You don't get to also destroy his car. At the movie theater, a location scout shows up and asks for the manager, which is now just two teenagers, and Tabby asks if the movie is going to be about the Millwood massacre, and the guy won't answer, but she later finds out that they plan to film a true crime horror story starring Sydney Sweeney and Emma Roberts, basically erasing her from her own story. I did just see a headline, I don't know if it's real, about the title Pretty Little Liars Scene Stealer, and it has some people thinking that a possible third season could have something like Scream, where there's an in-universe movie franchise called Stab based on the Ghostface killings. I think that would be really interesting, especially since Wes just left, but there's always the possibility of him coming back. But also, Tabby mentions that she wants to film her own movie based around the Millwood Massacre, which I would also be interested in seeing in the third season. So Imogen meets up with Dr. Sullivan, accusing her of being Bloody Rose, and Dr. Sullivan finally reveals that she treated Rose Waters after Angela killed herself, and when Rose mentioned the boy in the cage that she left behind, Dr. Sullivan went to the Waters house and found that Archie had escaped. She says that he wasn't a boy but a feral creature, and when she called the police days later, I'm not sure why we keep waiting days to call the police, but okay, there was no sign of him and they couldn't find him. So for years, Dr. Sullivan felt like she was being followed by Archie, and she reveals that her son Sebastian went on a run one night and never came home, and they found his body 2 days later, and she believes that it was Archie who killed him. For a second, I thought this might mean that Johnny couldn't be Dr. Sullivan's son, but you can have two sons. Not sure if she believes her, Imogen tells Johnny about Bloody Rose and how she suspects Dr. Sullivan. She says she tried to confirm her story but couldn't find anything online about her son. And I can't let go of the feeling that Johnny is Dr. Sullivan's son, so to me, it seems like he's really trying to stay quiet, while Imogen doubts the story of his brother's death. Or maybe not, because he invites her to spend the night, so Imogen texts Tabby, who asks to stay with Christian, and then tells him about Bloody Rose. So now both of the boyfriends know about Bloody Rose. Or have they known this whole time? The next day, Dr. Sullivan calls Imogen to tell her that she can prove her story, which is weird, because why do you think that Imogen didn't believe you? Did Johnny tell you that? I don't know. She seems upset, like I feel like she's been crying. So Imogen meets Dr. Sullivan at the cemetery at her son's grave. He's buried in Millwood because that's where they're originally from, even though he was killed while they were living in Rosewood, which I'm not even going to touch. Earlier at Karen's grave, Kelly asked her mom who she blames for Karen's death, and Mrs. Beasley gives the most obviously suspicious answer, saying that Karen wouldn't have been in the rafters if it wasn't for the liars. So she prays for them because they haven't atoned for what they've done, but they will. Mrs. Beasley leaves roses at Karen's grave, which Imogen later finds, so she rushes back to Dr. Sullivan, but all she finds is Dr. Sullivan's car running and filled with rose petals. It's very weird. Fully suspicious of her mother, Kelly drugs her and locks her in the prayer closet, which we can assume Mrs. Beasley did to her, so she calls Farron to meet her at the pool. Farron is too busy with Kelly's ex-boyfriend to answer her distress call, so Bloody Rose gets to the pool first and attacks Kelly. By the time that Farron checks her voicemail, she arrives to find Kelly floating face down in the pool, with Bloody Rose standing outside the fencing, scraping at it with her knife to be menacing. Is she actually dead? I don't know. She is floating face down in a pool, and if they were going to kill off anybody significant, I think Kelly's a good choice. But it's also very possible that it's just a cliffhanger, and the next episode will start with Farron giving her CPR and bringing her back. This episode went so hard in confirming suspicions about Mrs. Beasley while explaining a little bit more about Dr. Sullivan and also bringing back Rose Waters. The real Rose Waters shows up to Mouse's house at the very end, sitting in the kitchen with her grandma, and I don't feel like this is actually nefarious. Maybe since Mouse posted that video on Spooky Spaghetti and then got doxxed in the comments, Rose showed up because she's confused or needs help or doesn't know what's going on. But I'm really excited for this final episode, and I hope we get a satisfying reveal because I am so ready to find out who Bloody Rose is and what they want. So leave your final Bloody Rose guesses down in the comments.